And the data that we used in this study was based on online inquiry about board game habits and use of these electronic and digital elements in board games. This was conducted already in autumn 2016 with 21 questions. There were lots of about general board gaming questions. And but this study is limited to the 4 questions. There was a couple of more questions, but we narrowed it even more because it's easier. It was a better approach to limit only on these questions that contain about the elements in actual board games, not the digital or electronic features used around the board gaming situation. We had quite a lot of respondents, over 300, but only some of them actually answered to these open questions that we did this study or this analysis of. And there was 2 researchers, me and my colleague from the project, Sihvonen, and we have been conducted this qualitative analysis. Initially, when we were going through the data, it revealed that although it was not directly asked, there was lots of the responses. There was lots of attitude about liking or disliking hybrid elements in games. So we decided that it would be interesting to see how does this affect, or what kind of attitudes there are, and so we grouped those responses to 3 categories: negative, neutral, and positive, according to how they were, or what was the stance about the hybrid elements. And then further analyzed these, separating them based on the reasons why they considered those good or bad. And we asked in the study, we asked if people consider themselves a hobbyist board gamer or non-hobbyists, and most of these open responses are from the hobbyist board gamers. So that is something that needs to be considered when looking for the answer. Over 90% were from the hobbyists, because it wasn't mandatory to answer to these open questions. But, so of these 4 questions, 2 of them was quantitative one, and here, what the questions 13 and 15 were these quantitative questions, and then these open questions to tell a little bit more about why did they answer the way they did. Anyway, the question 13, it was about have they used any kind of electrical digital features connected to board gaming, and it wasn't really surprising that not that many have used them, but it's interesting that all of these have been used to some extent at least. And not surprisingly, smartphone or tablet applications were the most popular ones used. And question 14, we asked about what kind of games were those games that they actually used. And there was definitely most game, or was over 20 mentions of Mansions of Madness 2nd edition and XCOM the board game, and then at least once the other games. So materiality, that is obviously important thing in board games. And many respondents said that board games have considered time off from digitality, and that's why they don't want to have any digital elements with them. And some of them said that these were considered like a material game and digital game, separate categories that should not be mixed. It was like there was maybe no so much more justification for this, just don't like to mix them. And this is like, yeah, there's a mention of a study by Bergström, interesting study about materiality in board games, and this is something in similar lines with their study that to many respondents the actual materiality is enabling the social interaction, so it's important and important for the study, for the experience. Another thing that we find out digital obsolescence, which is kind of a new term that we came up with here, is that all the digitality, the digital element, that there was lots of fear that the digital element will get obsolete and make the board game unplayable, even though there wasn't, not many said that there actually had been these cases that happened, so but there's lots of one reason why you don't want to try out or think that it's not a good idea to make these hybrid games. Then this is obvious reason for not wanting to use something, usability problems. Digitality can bring a lot of these kind of problems with often because of bad design, the digital elements were just laid over the top of the game and wasn't designed from the early stages to be part of the game. Usually if it was, in some games like XCOM the board game, but they said that it was well designed and it was an important part of the actual gameplay. And one major thing was also that the digital elements are not as flexible as traditional ones if you want to use house rules and such. Then the sociability, this is connected to the material, at least in some form. Like said there already the board gaming is social fun apart from the digital world. And if the digital features would lessen the social element of the game, they were not liked. And there was also here came up the fear that it might do that, and everybody using the digital or the mobile applications. Then we go to the part where these are the features that actually encourage people to use these elements. why they wouldn't like them to be together, but something that just should be separate categories. And also it was interesting, the digital sociality thing, that although digital elements can be social, like you can use social media and stuff where you can discuss about games and so on, but still using any kind of digital social elements with the board games, it was seen that it interferes the actual situation, game playing situation, face-to-face situation. And one interesting notion was that there was no mentions about generation gap in the responses. Nobody said that it's a bad thing to have hybrid games because you can't play with your grandparents and or so on. So it's interesting. Yeah, usability, that's an obviously issue with hybrid elements, that they should be designed well. But it's interesting, like I mentioned, the fear of possible problems is often the reason for not using this or not being keen to use, even though if there was no bad experiences about them. And one thing is that it's kind of a value that people are expecting board games to last time much longer than digital games. Although one can wonder nowadays, when it's at least in hobbyist culture, board games are consumed quite fast pace. So do people actually play those old games after many years? So does the digital element actually obsolete that much faster than the physical game? And one thing that we also came up with is that, like, looking for these experiences and hybrid board games and people's attitudes towards them, they are excellent indicator on how board game experience and expectations are formed, which we can go to the last slide, where we are going to heading next with this study. Like one interesting possibility was to
Yeah, maybe if just one more question,
Yeah.
then we have to move on.
Yep. A clarification to the generation gap. So about you mentioned that there was no preference, that people weren't afraid about playing, for example, with their grandparents. But did you include the answerers' age in the questionnaire? So was there a preference between the older and younger people towards non-hybrid or hybrid games?
Yeah, there was the age was one thing that was asked, and the younger were more eager to use it in general.
Yeah, so it was as one would expect.
Okay, thank you. We will move on to the next presentation.
And now we can actually go to the session Team, Play and Learning. And the next presentation will be Prykäri and Sinisalo, what happened to Puro Bergström, using game-based learning in information literacy at Lahti Academic Library.
Hello everyone, I'm Prykäri and this is my colleague Riikka Sinisalo. We are information specialists from Lahti University of Applied Sciences and we work at the Lahti Academic Library over there. Some of you might not know Lahti University of Applied Sciences, so we are an international multidisciplinary higher education institution located in Lahti, Finland. And the fields of study include culture, business and hospitality, social and healthcare, and technology. We have around 5,000 students there and 400 faculty members.
Then a little about the background of our teaching. So we are teaching information literacy skills. And information literacy, or short IL, refers to the mastery of necessary knowledge of gathering, synthesizing, analyzing, interpreting, and evaluating information, and proper attitudes for information processing, with an understanding of the rationale behind using information. Information literacy is being held as a key to academic success at university, as well as an invaluable generic skill for lifelong learning. In higher education, undergraduates need to learn to use the research tools in order to locate and critically evaluate information sources. At the same time, however, undergraduate students are more technologically savvy than ever, and they tend to assume that this equates to information literacy, which I'm afraid it doesn't really. Information literacy teaching and guidance in higher education has been built upon global recommendations for roughly 20 years. First, there was information literacy competency standards for higher education, so 6 sets of skills that you need to have and hold to be an information literate. And when all these changes in information landscape occurs, it has been updated, and now it is organized, the concepts are organized around the ideas about information, research, and scholarship as a coherent whole. So no more set of standards, but frameworks for thinking and kind of things to take into consideration. In Lahti University of Applied Sciences, the basic information literacy skills are being taught for the first year students, and it's a 1 study credit. And when they are doing their thesis, usually in the 3rd year, we have the advanced information literacy skills teaching. The method usually are lectures, online courses, information literacy tests for the study credits mainly, and personal guidance. And when it comes to the experiences we have on the normal, regular learning and teaching ways, is that there is an overabundance of information in a very limited classroom time. We have 90 minutes contact teaching, so it's very little, and we are pouring everything to these just starting students, and they are overwhelmed with all of that. And learners are mostly as passive participators. We do have some practice training there, but of course in 90 minutes you can't do everything, so you can just cover very not so deeply on everything. So, and the current method does not foster any discussion as well, so it's not so interactive, just sage on stage.
Okay, so to solve some of the problems that Riikka mentioned there, mainly the lack of discussion, we decided to turn to game-based learning, and we designed a murder mystery escape room for our students. So a bit about game-based learning in higher education. So it refers to using games to enhance the learning experience, not just game elements. And there is research that shows that games with clearly specific content and clearly defined learning objectives can be very effective for learning, and that GBL is most effective for promoting high-order thinking, just as application, analysis and evaluation, which are very crucial in information literacy. There is some criticism that higher education students are a very heterogeneous group, so it might not be the preferred method for all students. But some research suggests that the students who are initially reluctant to use games usually overcome this after trying some learning games. Escape rooms, well, game-based learning usually refers to digital games, but as digital games and applications are fairly expensive to do and takes quite a while, quite a few education institutions, especially in higher education, have turned back to traditional games and the not so traditional games like escape rooms. Escape rooms especially are often used to develop soft skills like teamwork and leadership, and games, especially escape rooms, can provide an authentic collaborative context because you can rarely escape an escape room by yourself. You work in a team, so it's more natural setting. Some escape rooms can provide a certain level of real-world experience in the puzzles, so depending on how they are designed, they can be part of that. Escape rooms have been used in higher education elsewhere. For example, in medicine, there are diabetes-themed escape rooms for pharmacy students in the US, and then for computer network and information and security courses in computer science students in Barcelona, Spain. Librarians are quite keen on games as well, as it seems, so escape rooms have also been used in libraries before, but they have mainly been used for induction and orientation rather than information literacy teaching. So things like using the library catalogue, opening times of the library, just in general, that sort of stuff. As mentioned, escape rooms also promote critical thinking and problem solving, which are crucial skills to IL as well, so we think that this would be a very good match. This was our premise, at least.
Then the actual case, our game is called Murder in the Library, and it is a murder mystery, as already Essi mentioned. And we'll be showing you some of the introduction we are giving to the students when they come and play the game. So you can get the idea of what's going on there. And in addition, the rest of the dia show contains some snippets from the victim's diary, so perhaps the mystery will unfold itself. Well, a few words about the development process. Of course, the first thing here is learning, so we defined clear learning outcomes derived from the information literacy curriculum. So based on the national standards and then applied in Lahti UAS. So these things include such as basic searching skills, including defining major concepts to use as search terms, an ability to recognize and evaluate different types of sources and experts, and choosing the most fitting sources for higher education. These perhaps are also the points we, as teachers of information literacy, have been noting that are kind of in need for more work to be done there. Then writing a narrative for the game. Higher education setting was brought into a story, so you could feel that it could happen to anyone. Hopefully it doesn't, but it could. And try to create a compelling story so that it's not, I don't know, but the library lectures are usually not at the most compelling stuff there is in the world, but we tried to step that up a notch.
Yes, then we moved on to planning the actual puzzles and tasks. There were a few things that we had to take into consideration. Portability. Unfortunately, we don't have a dedicated escape room where we hold this, so we need to be able to take our escape room to a different class. Also, we have to take into consideration class and group sizes. Our class size is usually from 20 to 40 people. It's quite difficult having an escape room for 40 people, so we had to multiply it so we could have 40 people in one classroom playing the same game but slightly different, so they wouldn't be helping each other out. Then, like Riikka mentioned, we only have 90 minutes to do the whole teaching thing, so there were certain time constraints as well. We obviously did some play testing while we were doing the puzzles, so we had our colleagues and a few friends test out once we came up with a puzzle to see if it made any sense or not, so we did that throughout. Then we obviously tried to seamlessly combine the narrative and puzzles so that the puzzles would seem logical, so we used Puro's diary. That was the thing that took the story forward, and Puro's diary included some of the puzzles. What we did to keep the different groups from talking to each other, we created different research subjects for each group. So you have 40 people or 20 people in one room, divided into 4 or 5 groups, and then working on similar tasks but that have the same logic but are slightly different on the topic side.
And a quick word from Puro at this intersection. And then lesson plan for running the game. So basically, before the lesson begins, we go to the classroom. We are having the game and setting everything up. So dividing the tables into groups and putting all the clues there and diaries and all kind of mystery boxes with the locks and those kind of things. Then, when we begin with the students, it's 10 minutes briefing for the players, including practical information about escape rooms, because we have to take into consideration that not everyone has ever attended one. Then there's 45 minutes playtime, because we had the time constraint, so we deliberately are keeping it a bit shorter than the usual 60 minutes. Then the 30-minute debriefing and feedback. And this is an important thing when you have learning objectives, that you really go through what you were supposed to learn doing this and what was the key things. And that is the way they have already tried it, and then they hopefully see the light at the end, even though it has been unclear. And then we collect feedback, because we haven't, this is a new concept for us, and of course we want to know where we are going and is this the right way. So feedback is important as well. And after the students go away, we as facilitators reflect the game session and have a discussion and some compare notes, so we know what to do next.
Okay. Here's just the classroom setup. So we as game masters or facilitators are in the front of the room, and then we divide the room into different play areas and tell the students that to stay in their particular play area. They've been quite happy doing that. They don't go wandering around, which is good. And here you have some actual students engrossed in the game, so you can see that they are working with it and not talking to each other, which was quite nice to notice. There's another note from Puro.
All right. Then about the feedback, because this is a new concept and we wanted to know, is this something we should continue working on, putting our time and resources on this or not? We just wanted to know yes or no, just not on any Likert scale or something like that. We just wanted to know if it is working or not, and that is something it is very quick and easy to give feedback, because students might sometimes be tired of all these questionnaire forms. So we wanted to make it so that everyone is able to give the feedback to us. First, there's a total of 6 statements, and first 4 of them is about the contents. So we wanted to know if the terms and techniques, search terms and techniques were there. Did they learn about it? Did they learn about evaluating information and to recognize plagiarism? And finally, to evaluate authors' experience and credibility. And then the final 2 statements were about the method. So would teachers find this method the one they would? Oh my God. It's such a small font, I really can't see anything. It's escape rooms. It's a solid way to teach information retrieval and assessment skills. So, do you find it good method or not? And then finally, would you recommend it to your fellow student? And then there was open-ended questions. You could write feedback. So this was one of them, and mainly it was very positive.
Yes. So we can consider that our escape room trial was a success. The learning objectives were generally met, and the escape room was seen mainly as a good learning tool. Even some of the reluctant students got really into the game very, very quickly. And students would recommend this method to their peers.
Of course, there are always some room for improvement, which came from the questionnaire as well. So plagiarism, as you might have noticed, was the one bar that didn't go all the way to yes, and it was awesome and great. There was some people that didn't quite grasp it. And then some open-ended answers stated that search term selection puzzle needed clarifying, so they struggled with that and wanted to tell that to us as well.
We obviously, because we run this for the first time, we did it as a pair, which was quite helpful. That meant that we could also take notes of the students and groups and listen to some of their discussions. So we took some notes. We noticed that the groups very actively discussed the information literacy topics like source evaluation and credibility, and they had some really, really good discussions going there, which they wouldn't normally in class. The escape room setting activated some outside-the-box thinking, so some of it was quite out there. It was interesting to see how the students went about solving the puzzles. There was no helping other groups. They got quite competitive, so all groups wanted to be the first one to solve the murder, so we're quite happy with that. It also activated the group, so the ones that were slightly skeptical were pulled in by the story once they got started. And obviously both the introduction and debriefing are very important parts of the session. Without either one, the experience is lacking.
What we did also notice that it is a very fine line to balance between the narrative being mysterious enough and being instructive. So you would have to have some level of mystery, but you should always be some kind of idea what to do next, because the setting is not that inspiring as the usual escape room is. Possible gameplay enhancements could be done, such as personalized paths for different groups. Now we have a different story. They have a different research question there, but they all go through the game in the same order. So the puzzles are all in same order. So we could variate there. And of course the visual appearance of materials, because we've been doing this on a shoelace budget and it's really authentic student diary thing going on there.
Yes, there's handwritten notes there. I'm going to skip this because we're running out of time, but yes, you did see the feedback, so a few things that we need to improve, mostly a positive experience, and team building was also mentioned. Here's the final note from Puro.
And then the future, which Puro might not hold anymore. We are very inspired by the encouraging feedback and the observations. So we are planning to develop the game further so that it covers in more detail the key concepts from the information literacy frames, and of course helps the students to become increasingly information literate. And what are other points we should consider? Maybe the most important one is that at what point of studies is the escape room most fitting? Is it for a revision or learning new things? Because to solve the puzzles you should know something, and to be successful and to be fast, it is better that you are already familiar with some of our sources and stuff. So perhaps revision, perhaps learning new things. It's a balance. Then we've had feedback from the faculty when we tested with them that we should think of commercializing. And then finally, we should kind of validate the method by comparing the learning results to traditional lesson plan. So is this really worth the extra effort or not?
Thank you. Any questions and comments on this? After this. Oh yeah, we do have references because we don't believe in plagiarism. We are, after all, from the library.
So, thanks for this great presentation. I was wondering if you said as your last point that you want to compare the results from this kind of learning to a regular lesson plan. I wonder, have you tried the sort of midway option of it's a regular lesson plan, but they have a very clear objective with a very clear goal? Because I feel like, as a person who has taken into like these similar courses in a different university, though, I feel like many of the lesson plans were like, everybody's just sitting by a computer and listening to the teacher, and then they say that, oh, you can try out, search something that's to do with your thesis idea, but nobody has a thesis idea yet, so people are just randomly typing things, and that it's not very motivating, let's say. But if they had a very specific thing like this, do you think that that would also work?
We have tried that in our lessons before with varying results. I'm sure you can agree with this. It really depends on the student group. Some of them are really excited to do if you have like, this is the topic, this is what all you should search something with. But we usually find in the traditional lesson, because it is only 90 minutes, that we do tend to run out of time. So it's just a very, very quick run through. So yeah, but it's definitely something that we will consider.
Yeah. And in a perfect world where we have all the resources and time, we'll do everything.
Yes.
Every kind of imaginable version of everything.
Yeah, Aaro Sohari, University of Helsinki, and editor of TW. Thank you for the presentation. Now, I would like to actually continue from the previous commentator. Because clearly you use this to teach very essential skills for the students, and so I would be interested to learn more on sort of how work-intensive developing this module was, because I see a lot of potential in sort of BA level teaching of basic research skills, basic working skills for students, and therein being able to reuse this type of module, I think would be sort of resource manageable, considering the limitations in teaching to begin with. So could you please maybe elaborate on that a bit more, on sort of how much work this was and how sort of well you can then use the same methodology for teaching other essential skills?
We've had this same kind of feedback from our faculty as well. So everyone with the common studies, like things like communication and those kind of areas of expertise, are very interested in this kind of learning methods. And we've been asked the same thing, that how much of resources this took. But
that's a bit of a tricky question, because we did the whole development process as a side project with all of our other day jobs, and all of our other day jobs kind of changed during the development process, so we went on to work in other projects, which kind of ended up in doing not so much library work. So it kind of, time-wise, it took probably 6 months. But the actual workload wasn't that much because we had so little time to develop it. Probably the most difficult part is to coming up with the clear learning objectives, that having those and then thinking what puzzles actually help that further. And that's something that you need to test a few times, because we had some, we thought, wonderful ideas, which would be like, this is the best, everyone's going to love this. And then we play tested them, and our colleagues were like, yeah, that's not working. We don't have a clue what you're on about. So it is time intensive, but it is also very, very rewarding. So, and there are some resources for coming up with educational escape rooms, or you can just use the ones that are for creating your own escape room and just kind of tweak it a bit to have in the higher education setting.
Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. You mentioned you had a debriefing in there and emphasized the importance of both briefing and debriefing. Can you elaborate a bit on how did you run the debriefing and how did that go?
Well, it's just a slideshow usually. So we go through the questions and then the background and the theoretical things that you should take into consideration, and maybe show a little about how this works and what you were supposed to be doing. So, and then of course we have been, from the framework, we have been like titling them. So we are giving them some framework. So this has to do with like evaluating information, and this has to do with knowing your experts and that kind of thing. So it's a regular dia-based show, but usually because of the excitement they've just had, the students are pretty active, so they are commenting there, and it's kind of a very nice socio-constructive way to go through things. So we get feedback from that as well.
Thank you. And if I can ask one further question, you mentioned comparing this to other methods. How would you go about evaluating this sort of a method and then some other alternative?
That's kind of one of the things that we are trying to come up with, struggling with, yes. We do have at the moment the information literacy test, which is used after the traditional classroom. So one way would be to have the students who have been taking the traditional classroom test and the ones who have done the escape room, have them do the test and see how they compare. But that would possibly not be the best method. So that's something we're hopefully developing.
And of course, we have a feedback form we use in general from our IL teaching, and it has these statements that I know this and this, that and that well, and you can scale yourself. And of course we could compare those. Do the persons who were at the escape room, you give themselves better marks, but I don't know, it has problems as well. So the reliable and good method for that is kind of an
issue.
Yeah. You can suggest something.
Any more questions? We have time for one more question.
Hello, this was a very interesting presentation. Thank you for that. I would just like to know a bit more about your experience with escape rooms as designers. Was this the first project you did? What resources did you have available? You already mentioned some create your own escape room manuals and things like that. So what was your basis for doing this?
This was the first escape room that we created because, we're a bit ambitious like that, but we did attend escape room workshop, which was meant for libraries. So we got a few really good resources there, and the workshop facilitator, Andrew Walsh, he's done using escape rooms in libraries, little booklet, which is probably available online as well. So that was kind of where it all started, but then we both played escape rooms, so we kind of drew from our own knowledge and then, as I said, used online resources, so it was a bit of a mix and match.
Okay, thank you. We will move on to the last presentation of this session, which is Savoranta Training Simulations as Production of Expert Communality in Finnish Civilian Crisis Management.
I'm just thinking now how we could organize an escape room for our experts. Joo. Otapa se PDF, se on ehkä luotettavampi.
Joo. Niin, se pitäis tää näyttö
full screen. Joo.
Mä laitan, kun se oli nyt taas toi. Ja se, että sä näet sen tästä näin.
Joo. Full screen on hyvä.
Joo, sekin. Tää on nyt venytetty näyttö.
By the way, if you still lack a means of making notes, let me know by raising your hand and I will bring you a notepad and a pen.
No niin, nyt se on sitten näin.
All right. Let's just test this. Excellent. Okay, hello. I'm just going to jump into what Professor Harviainen said in the keynote about entries into game studies coming from outside of game studies often, and I think we've seen some of that here already just now, and this is going to be another one of those examples. So I will be talking today about training simulations and communality, which I'm really glad that the community is mentioned in the topic of the seminar, because this is something that I've been looking at in my work for a year or two now, and it's a good opportunity to explore this a little further. My talk comes from outside of research, more from the development focus here, since there's actually no research conducted yet. So I will mainly be raising questions and thinking about how we could approach this topic. Firstly, my goal here today is to introduce you to this kind of role-play-based training. And secondly, then to move further on into the community. So first I'm going to just rapid fire some slides to give a framework of what I'm talking about. Crisis management, civilian crisis management is one way in which the international community assists conflict-affected countries. Many of you know peacekeeping, diplomacy, development aid. This is the toolbox which includes also civilian crisis management. The actual activities involved are usually developing the rule of law institutions in these countries, monitoring ceasefires, in some cases even functioning as the police force or the judiciary of a country. suffering from conflict. What this means in practice is sending Finnish experts into these countries. This is from this spring, our map. You can see mainly in Africa, the Middle East, Eastern Europe. At any given time, about 100 to 150 Finnish experts are working in these countries. They are usually deployed for a period of up to 1 to 2 years in very tightly knit communities, often isolated from the surrounding society. And this highlights the need for proper preparation. Usually this happens in the context of European Union's external action, with the European Union having about 17 missions at the moment with 4,000 people. But there's also the United Nations and OSCE missions out there. Now, onto the actual simulation element of all of this. Finland organizes a basic course for all of our experts being deployed with the aim of simulating the kinds of duties and the kinds of elements that these people will encounter in the field. This ranges from more mundane tasks to very exceptional conditions. And it's a type of simulation-enhanced interprofessional education, a term coined by the medical community, which has studied this a lot more than we have in our community. As I mentioned, there's also the exceptional, because you're working in a hostile, often hostile environment with several risks associated. For this reason, the experts also face the kinds of threats and emergencies that might happen in a conflict situation. Yeah, it's a good name, HEAT, Hostile Environment Awareness Training. A unique feature of this Finnish roleplay, conflict roleplay, is that it coincides with another course, a military course. So we actually here have two parallel, okay, I'm just going to call them LARPs, because we call them field training exercises, functional training exercises, situational training exercises, all sorts of fancy names. It's a LARP. But anyway, you have on the left-hand side, you have a civilian role play of a European Union field mission. On the right-hand side, you have a military role play of a United Nations military mission. And these two courses, they coincide. They are organized in the same time, in the same area. They have the same conflict scenario, which we're about to go into, and they interact with each other. So they have coordination meetings, very exciting, patrolling and other events. The idea here is to build comprehensiveness, which is civil-military cooperation, also inter-organizational cooperation, so how different organizations can work together in the field. Now, you might be wondering what this scenario looks like. I'm not going to open up the details too much, because I don't want to spoil anybody who in the future might take part in this course. It takes place in the Jämijärvi area in Finland, and it's a somewhat exceptional scenario from a Finnish context, because there's no yellow involved here. But I have some pictures that might tell this story a little better. So this is what it looks like in the field. You've got planning, lots of planning, coordination, you've got patrolling and the actual physical moving about. What do? You don't move in the field in the way we move here. There's a lot of security concerns, a lot of monitoring, because a lot of our staff at the moment are deployed in eastern Ukraine, monitoring the ceasefire there. Also, then there's the exceptional. You can face military roadblocks. You have to know what to do when you meet armed forces. There's medical emergencies and encounters with hostile forces here on the upper right-hand side, which that's going to be followed by the escape room, by the way. But, and then of course things that go boom here in the right below corner. Ultimately, of course, the idea is to make the play into a reality. not the things that go boom. But so here we have some pictures from the field. Experts in Georgia monitoring some mountains. Some pictures from Ukraine on the right-hand side, and then from Somalia here on the left-hand side. So that's what the field looks like. But what about the community? What is this community that I'm talking about? The participants on our course are a truly interprofessional, heterogeneous group of experts. Unfortunately, I couldn't have more specific slides here for you, but as you can see, about a third of the course come from rule of law institutions: police, border, customs, justice, including corrections, and some military. The other here is a very broad set of people. People working in NGOs, in the private sector, media, political fields, academia, from Finland and abroad. So a lot of different backgrounds. The age range is from about 27 to 65, all walks of life. So what these people share is the topic of crisis management, but they come from very different fields, subject matter experts. And what the course aims to do also is to bring them together to form a community, not just teach them how to work, but to actually have them be able to trust each other in the way that you need to be able to trust your colleagues in a conflict setting. So I've been working with this community for a few years now as the lessons learned officer, and I often meet them at the end of their mission cycle. First they go to training, then they go to the field to actually do their assignment, then they come back to a feedback lesson. And there's one thing that I've been encountering constantly in my interaction with these experts is a common discussion here. This is happening years after their initial encounter with each other or the subject of crisis management. So what they do is they compare their experiences from the very early onset, in the beginning of the course. What did you do when that happened? Oh, we did this. They've been to the field, but still they go back to the actual LARP to, compare their experiences. And also, how did something in the course relate to something in the field? How realistic was it? And also what happens through this cycle of training, deployment and feedback is that this initially an expert community forms into a social network, a social community of friends. Not a huge surprise if you spend 1 to 2 years living in a camp behind barbed wire with people, you build connections. And it's a very strange setting. It's a very specialized field. And the interaction between this expert side of the community and the social side of the community is something that really sets this community apart. So I've been, in the last year or two, my thinking on this has developed quite a bit. I started looking at the community aspect from a more traditional training research side. And the transfer of training is something that we look at when we teach our experts. And this includes, transfer of training is a broad field in itself and has many aspects. From a community building aspect, usually the role of networking is highlighted from training programs. This happens also in traditional education. Those of us who have studied with a group of people tend to usually be friends with a lot of those people after we graduate. What I'm wondering is, how does this role-play setting, this role-playing element of the expert training facilitate this? What is that big arrow? And does role-playing extraordinary situations build more meaningful connections? And how we could also utilize this to foster the community even further? I have no answer to this yet, but it's a question that was initially on my mind. A second way that we can look at this topic also is the community of practice perspective, which is very common in international development and peace and security fields. And this is an easy argument to make. these people do form a community of practice. They do share a domain of knowledge outside of their specific subject matters. There is a specific notion of community, and they work in practice in the field. But in the community of practice model, practice refers to the actual doing in the field in this context, not the training itself. But what I'm thinking is, are we kind of kickstarting this community of practice development by simulating the practice itself? And how could we strengthen the interaction between the play in our course and the practice in the field? Finally, now we've arrived into my dive into the rabbit hole of game studies. And I'm a bit anxious about this. So, thinking about this, some time ago I ran into this wonderful article from Bowman and Standiford about immersion. And it really clicked with me about what could explain the importance of this training course to the participants. This quote about shared imagination, and particularly immersing into a community that Bowman and Standiford make, kind of, at this point I should probably also mention that I became really critical of my title at this point, because I say that simulation as a community building tool. What if it's not so much the simulation, it's the organizing the simulation and taking those people in and putting them into the forest together. So maybe not so much the simulation, but actually isolation as a way of building community. But this leads to my ultimate question, that could simulation-based training courses be considered as a way for heterogeneous interprofessional groups to imagine a shared expertise? This sets apart from the traditional notion of expertise, which focuses on having a certain experience level or skill set compared to a topic, but actually making it something that you create together with others. So these are the questions that I just wanted to throw out there. How am I going to answer these? Well, next month in the Jämijärvi area, Blueland and Greyland will again go to war. War never changes. But I'm going to be there too, because I'm going to be observing this. And how does the course work, and what goes on in this environment. And I hope to follow this up next spring in the very next course, but with a more thorough survey and participant observation. And through this, we could possibly develop the data set on this kind of training, which is really world-leading, that we can further develop the training itself and promote this kind of training abroad. Because what we're doing in Finland, okay, this is a bit self-promotionary now, what we're doing in Finland is not done in most places that send staff into these kind of environments. They go to more traditional classroom-based training. So there are my questions and my next steps. I want to conclude by tying this into a broader framework and why I wanted to come here today to talk to you. There's a lot happening, or has been happening for a while now, in the international peace and security training sector on gamification. Just 2 years ago, we got a big report on the use of simulation in Finnish training that we participated to. Our course director wrote a chapter on that publication. At the same time, currently there is ongoing Horizon 2020 project, Gaming for Peace, which from Finland, there's the Finnish military is participating, and also Laurea, University of Applied Sciences. And they are developing a virtual reality gaming tool for peacekeeper training. So I don't know the specifics of that. I'm really interested in seeing what they come up with, whether it's an MMO or a single player or whatever. Also, from a more gaming perspective, this spring, the largest ever international game-based exercise was organized in Sweden and in a lot of other countries. Viking 18. This is a computer-enhanced simulation where there's an actual game different military and civilian actors are actually playing the game physically and also in an online environment to try to settle an international conflict. And finally, we are a member of the ENTRI consortium on Europe's new training initiative for civilian crisis management. This is through what we have developed this actual course that I just presented to you, and this ENTRI project is now moving forward into a next step in which I hope that we can bring this kind of course training forward and maybe have a bit more immersion and gamification included there. Thank you. Questions?
I know the U.S. military does some similar work looking, in a lot of cases, more specifically at social interaction training,
Yep.
often in not particularly pleasant contexts. But I'm wondering if it would be interesting to look at the kind of differential and training effect of having a classroom conversation around like emotional self-management, different social scripts presenting across kind of cultural barriers or different structures versus the like field simulation role-playing there. Because that feels like it's one of the places where especially high fidelity and high emotional resolution simulations may actually let us do things that we really can't do in the classroom in terms of priming people, so that when they do a complex emotional social thing in the field, it's not the first time they've done it.
That's a very good point, actually, and this is really something that I would love to do, but the circumstances of what kind of courses there are available hinders that a bit. But what I can tell you is that on the military side, they use simulation a lot more than we do actually on the civilian side. But there are some differences because there's a tradition of war gaming in the military side, which now is developing into more peace gaming, where it's not a zero-sum type of game, but it's more of a soft skills development environment that you need in the field. But that's a very good point, and that I have that pretty much exact question on my mind as I'm looking at this topic.
I'd love to talk more later.
Any other questions?
Hey, I would like to ask about the language which is used during those simulations. Are you basically using only Finnish, or are you trying to use also the language of your destination? And what about the ethnicity of the actors, or like ethnical props? Are they used? Do you use the cultural references and language references in your simulation? Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. On the language side, the course is conducted completely in English because it's open to international participants, and we usually have about 1/4 of participants outside from Finland, which really enhances the international nature of it. And also a specific element in the course is the use of translators. So you have translators there, and you as a participant in the role play have to use the translator to interact with the role players. I don't actually know how the language is handled there. Are the role players using a specific different language, or how that's handled here? When it comes to the cultural side, traditionally these courses mix up all sorts of things to create this kind of very generalized, not familiar culture. For example, one thing that we do a lot in Finland is we use a lot of Finnish tropes. It's fun for those coming from abroad, particularly. The neighboring country is Finlandia. That's just typical. But you can see in some of the pictures that you have some clothing of unspecific ethnicity, and they might mix up. In some instances, they might mix up music from 5 continents into a mixtape that creates an ambient sound. It would actually be a very interesting topic to see to what kind of cultural aspects are used to really fill out the scenario and build the culture of this scenario. It hasn't been done actually at all, and it's something also that I'm curious about.
Thanks for this great presentation. I might be able to, I'm going to pick up on what she just asked about language. I actually study interpreting and translation at Tampere, and I know many of my fellow students go to this thing to play the translators, the interpreters. And I know that the language often used is Russian. I think they're afraid to use the English or German, which are the other languages widely taught for interpreters in Tampere.
I think what might happen actually, now that I was thinking through it more, is that it depends on the role players and their language setting on what languages are used as the foreign language often. And they have, I think they also try to mix a couple of languages so to have this diversity.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they use several languages, and both the interpreters, but the interpretation students also play the hostiles sometimes. They play the, people with the foreign language who only speak a foreign language.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for the amazing presentation. I come from organization research side, so I was beyond thrilled to see committee of practice and other stuff there. So actually related to that, really interesting point that you describe a learning outcome from a simulation that does not conform to the idea of a pre-test and a post-test.
Yes.
Can you elaborate on that? Is that normal? Is that exciting? What's coming up?
Well, one of the things in the beginning slides with lots of text was that we're trying to build attitudes and soft skills, and these are hard to measure. So that's not really, we have an out test, something where you test, but that's more focused on the classroom sections of the course. The simulation itself is not tested, so it's just an experience for you. And of course, how you deal in the experience, there is a bit of evaluation happening there as our staff is there present, but you can't fail that. It's your choice to whether you want to move on to a deployment, apply for a deployment after that. So it's not really tested.
All right, thank you.
Any more questions?
Hi, I might have a weird question, I'm not sure. But they're training for something really serious, and usually when you play or when you simulate something, then the more serious stuff you train for, the more humor you might use to kind of handle what's coming ahead or what they're dealing with. So are the simulations really serious, or is there humor involved? Do they get carried away with the, what's it like?
I haven't been on our own course, but from other courses I can tell you that there is a lot of humor involved in a lot of the situations, and because you've got interactions with very different types of people, stuff happens, and you get these jokes and tropes that carry on forward for years even from a single course. Of course, some of those situations we try to make it as serious as possible because it can get serious in the field. So if you don't take it seriously, we're going to make it serious for you, let's say.
Any more? We have time for one more question. If not, then thank you for the presentation.
And thank you for the good question.
And then, before you all leave, there is still one more section. The Finnish Society for Game Research introduces itself.
Okay, I'm Tapani Joelsson from the Finnish Society for Game Researchers. Okay, thanks for the note. So I start from the beginning. I'm Tapani Joelsson from the Finnish Society for Game Researchers. We are a new society. We started like 2 years ago. And we are a society with goals that are supposed to help us to do our job better. So we try to act as a link between game researchers, because like it has already been noted here, we come from very diverse backgrounds. Sometimes even people in the same university or University of Applied Science do not know that their colleague is doing something related to games. So we try to improve on that. We also act as a multidisciplinary representative for our people. But probably our most important things are to promote games and gaming-related research, especially the high-quality scientific research on these matters. But we also promote research-based training and participate on the public discussion related to games, so that it's not just one-sided note that games are bad. We try to be a neutral, research-based voice on this matter. And if necessary, we also try to coordinate international contacts for our members. Games research is really international business, so sometimes it helps to have a representative from other countries also. But we are a very small society. We have something like 15 members at the moment, and we arrange these activities with these forces, which is the annual conference of game research. It was in Jyväskylä this year. I don't know yet where it is during next year. And we also published the annual game research yearbook, and all of this is available from this net site, pelitutkimus.fi. And at the moment, our board is this. We are chaired by Tanja Sihvonen from the University of Vaasa, and the rest of the board members are representing various universities in Finland. At the moment, we don't have members in the board from the universities of applied science, but that of course might change in the future if we get more members. And as you can see, we are from really spread in the university sector, and we are also from really various faculties. Like I'm from the Department of Future Technologies, so I'm mostly teaching something like software architectures and software production. But we have people from humanities, technology, arts, and so on. And we are involved in various research subjects, ranging from algorithms to society building, communities, game design, and so on. So if you think that this might be a home for you, please go to our website and consider joining our ranks. We are quite nice people, I might say. And I will be at the Ropecon during whole weekend, probably in room 211 all the time, because I'm playing a game that has been run on that room for several years, and I'm not leaving that, because otherwise Charlie might not be surfing. That's fun to people that know that game. So if you can ask stuff from me now, or come to that room and ask personally in that context. But if there is no questions or any comments or anything else, I think that we can go to the lunch bit early. I'm just really hungry, that's why I try to be fast.
Any questions? Okay, we can say thank you and move on to lunch.
Se on ihan sillä siinä. sen ihmeempää. Joo. No siis ei sen jälkeen varmaan säätöä, mutta sitä ennen saan nähdä. Mä just mietin, että laitanko mä täältä koneen.